Welcome back to Blockstream Talk. This week we're speaking to Andrew and Raul from Jan3. Jan3's Aqua wallet has received quite a bit of attention. In this conversation, we talked a bit about what sets it apart and why they decided to focus on Tether and Bitcoin, as well as how they managed to streamline Layer-2 payments with Liquid and Lightning. We also discussed how Tether in places like Latin America can act as a feeder, introducing more people to Bitcoin. And finally, we cover Jan3's finance business, which helps larger investors make their first foray into Bitcoin, and how current market dynamics are providing a tailwind for their conversations with mainstream institutional investors and policymakers from across the globe. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Andrew, Raul, thanks for joining the podcast today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, to start things off, do you guys want to maybe introduce yourselves and let us know what your role is at Jan3?
Okay, so I'm marketing director at Jan3. Basically, I work alongside Edwin Rivas, who's our CMO, basically designing the strategy for what's the best way to promote this very particular company that's dedicated to Bitcoin adoption, and also to fine-tune details around Aqua, which is supposed to be a wallet that caters to people in developing countries mostly, and aims to solve that very important issue of having USDT and Bitcoin in a single place. So I think part of my role is to bring some of that insight from Latin American markets, and also from Edwin as well. We have lots of people on our team from this side of the world. And I think it provides a lot of insight to the way people use Bitcoin over in these places, most of it.
Yeah, so Andrew Howard, Chief Business Officer of Jan3, and we all kind of wear many different hats, but I work a lot on Jan3 Financial, which is a service where high net worth individuals, family offices, corporations, institutions can buy large amounts of Bitcoin via OTC. I also worked with basically all things partnerships with Jan3, whether that be nation-state adoption activities or Aqua. So we've got a lot of different things we're working on, but that's a brief synopsis. And yeah, Bitcoiner since 2017, and super passionate about everything going on now.
That's great. So you guys recently, you just mentioned Aqua. You not too long ago launched Aqua, which I think has been really well received by the market. I think the reviews and kind of the commentary I've seen from people have been really, really positive. And from my own perspective, it seems like a really great, simple wallet, kind of the wallet that I think a lot of people have been waiting for. What do you think are the key features that differentiate it from other wallets?
One thing I think is definitely simplicity. For people who have wallets where they have to manage their own Lightning channels, it can be expensive, especially for people in developing markets, and it can be a major hassle. And the reality is that most people in the world want convenience, and we need to meet people where they're at. So Aqua simplifies all of that, so you don't have to manage any channels. You can still interact with the Lightning network. It's really a Bitcoin, so on-chain and Layer-2 wallet, primarily with the Liquid network. We can get into that more. And then another difference is, Aqua, when you open the wallet, it has spending account and saving account. And so in spending account is Tether. And we felt that was something that the world really needs, because the world wants dollars right now. Dollars are still in demand, regardless of the fact that the U.S. is, what are we at, 34 trillion in debt, and no country has had the world reserve currency forever, right? But a lot of countries still want the dollar, and so a good way to get people onto saving in Bitcoin is to help them have a platform where they can spend and receive dollars, and so that's what Aqua provides. So yeah, Raul, any thoughts there?
Okay, so going back to Andrew's answer when he introduced himself, I'm also Bitcoiner class, perhaps like 2013, 2017. And if you go back to when you guys probably first started using Bitcoin wallets, it was a very different experience back in the day. And I think Aqua's evolution kind of also shows that. First of all, because we didn't have a proper Bitcoin wallet that would give you USDT in one place. And I think one of the things that you start to notice as the years go by, especially in Latin America, is that, well, along the way, people sort of started shifting over to USDT over Bitcoin, partly because that's what the market wanted. Originally, you had exchanges that allowed people to get away from inflation using Bitcoin in places like Argentina, Venezuela, for myself, Colombia. But then a lot of that trading volume in peer-to-peer markets went over to USDT. So what you ended up having was that people started using exchanges as actual wallets, which is a very poor practice. And you never know when an exchange is going to collapse, or especially if it's a smaller exchange locally ran in a Latin American country, that's not something you want to rely on. So what you get with Aqua, and especially for me, is that you can actually orange pill people, and you can tell them, hey, here's some Bitcoin. You can, typical stuff. You send them some Bitcoin over Lightning, and now they can convert it to USDT really quickly, really cheap, if they actually want to. So they get to see that tangible USD value that a lot of people actually want, because they might be confused by Bitcoin. And you also get the benefit that you can send both USDT or Bitcoin via Lightning to an exchange, which is what a lot of people in Latin America use. You exchange your USDT or Bitcoin for local currency, because that's the easier way to actually be able to use your Bitcoin. So what you get with Aqua is that you can provide people ready-made non-custodial solution that puts you in touch with basically the main layer 2 technologies that Bitcoin has to offer. It gives you stable coins, and it gives you non-custodial Bitcoin. So you get all the lessons, all these essential lessons that people should get when they're starting to learn about Bitcoin. They can get it all in one place. And I think that's very valuable. At least from my experience, I've tried to orange pill, especially older people. They don't want to deal with complex wallets, and sometimes they're happy to leave their money on exchanges. But the process of getting them to withdraw their funds can be hard, because they're not comfortable just having Bitcoin sometimes, and that's a reality that we have to deal with. Some people are just not ready to go all in on Bitcoin. They might still want to have USDT for whatever personal reason. So that, I think that's the biggest differentiator for Aqua.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, so do you see Tether as kind of a gateway drug, for lack of a better term, to get people interested in Bitcoin?
For sure. It used to be the other way around. People started getting into Bitcoin, at least in Venezuela, because it was the way that it was the one thing that would allow you to get rid of your bolívares. And the same for the peso in Argentina, and the Colombian peso, and it started crumbling as well. So once they got kind of rid of that problem, they land into USDT. But then you remember that you had Bitcoin, or that your friends that had also used Bitcoin mm, are seeing their money go up in value. Now they have more money, so it's it totally is. And I think a huge part of the expansion that we've had over the past few years, Tether and USDT, it helped fast track it across all the continent.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. If you think back to 2014 or 2015, there was a narrative around Bitcoin that it could be used for cross-border payments. And I think that over time, as Tether became larger, it just kind of ate that part of the Bitcoin value proposition. And that's just because it's a lower volatility asset. And I think for people that, aren't deep in the weeds as us and they're not interested in Bitcoin, it's probably a better tool for that purpose. I think over time, as as Bitcoin gets bigger and the volatility comes out of it, it'll probably take that market back. But for now, I think there was a real shift in that narrative. I think maybe 2014 or 2015ish, and Tether has seemed to have just run away with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Andrew mentioned, I think dividing accounts into basically a checking account, a spending account, and a savings account, it helps now drive down the point that that's probably how most people see it. Bitcoins are something that you're going to get to keep for the long term. Yeah, it's savings. It's a savings technology. That's how we sell it. Many of us try to sell it. But Tether is the thing that you spend right away, that you save up for bills and such. So it's about trying to simplify things for as many people, because in the end, most people don't even know how Bitcoin works. Most of those users that just wanted to get rid of their pesos, their bolivares, they just wanted something better. And people don't care if it's USDT on Liquid or if it's USDT on Tron. They just care that that it looks nice in green and it says USD on it.
Yeah, it's just a tool. I think that's what people who get caught up in the Tether FUD, they don't realize. And there's a big difference, I think, between how Tether is viewed in emerging markets and how it's viewed in maybe the G7. And in emerging markets, it's just a tool, and people will use it for as long as it works. And if it doesn't work, then they'll move on to something else. But it's just a really good tool at the moment.
Exactly.
What about on the Lightning side? Can you talk about how you've implemented Lightning in Aqua Wallet?
Yeah, I think it's partly it follows the same philosophy. So we have Lightning wallets. Depends on when you started using Lightning. What was your first contact with it? So you start using it, but you don't necessarily have to know how it works. If you get a custodial wallet, you just maybe you have a Lightning address in it, or that you used to get some sats or not. But in the end, what you want is fast and small payments. That's it. That's what you want. That's the key feature. So in Aqua, we use Lightning by Bolt's trustless swaps, which is basically an improved Liquid-enabled version of the submarine swaps that Moon Wallet used at a time. And Moon Wallet was really, really popular. I think it was partly because it was endorsed by Jack Dorsey at the time. It was also made by Argentinian developers, and it was one of the most popular wallets. And why? Because it was very convenient. You had on-chain Bitcoin and you had Lightning in one place. You could carry around. You could go to El Salvador with a single wallet, and you could basically get by with it. It also got rid of the traditional 12-word backup, which might be a negative. Depends on how you look at it. For me, at least it was. So it's, again, the same philosophy. It's about simplicity. So by having your Lightning balance in Liquid, because every single sat you get via Lightning or you send via Lightning is actually run through Liquid. People don't care that it's Liquid. People care that it's a Layer-2 solution and it's faster and cheaper to use Bitcoin. And now you have the benefit that you can swap it over to USDT if you want. So the decision was made because, well, again, you have a tool that's Liquid, and it's going to allow you to use Lightning much easier, and in some cases cheaper, because if you want to keep the non-custodial philosophy, we ran a small study. I think Anita Posh also did an article somewhat recently. If you're going to open channels, which is, I think, quite a leap for the novice users, and even for veteran users, it's not necessarily the most fun thing to do. It can be quite annoying running Lightning node and keeping up with channel liquidity. That's not for most people. That's for the enthusiasts out there. So in the end, we just wanted to give people tools, and that's why we chose this approach. This way, people don't have to deal with channels and liquidity. You might not even ever have to know what that is if you don't run into any issues. And it's going to keep getting better as Liquid technology gets better, as Bolts gets better, as we add Taproot swap as well. So it can only improve from here. And I think it already poses a decent solution for people. It might not fulfill the purpose of sending 21 sats by an Author at the moment. It could do it eventually. But in the end, it's about solving the bigger problem that most people have. I think that's the approach to why we use Liquid, and that's about it.
And I think, as Andrew mentioned, it meets the market where it's at too. It doesn't kind of take an ideological perspective, but it gives the market the tool that it's looking for. So I think that's a really good approach. What about liquid for payments? So I heard Samson on a recent podcast talking about that. That's a thought that I've had as well, because it settles so quickly. It settles in 1 minute. And when I'm at Starbucks waiting in line for people to use the Starbucks app or that card, it takes it takes longer than 1 minute for them to buy their coffee. So do you see liquid as a viable solution for payments as well?
Okay, I'll take this one. So I'm not sure if I would agree with that. I think right now, just being totally frank here, it is oftentimes, at least in America or a Western country, quicker to spend money on a credit or debit card versus sending a liquid transaction and having finality. Liquid has 1 minute block times. On-chain Bitcoin has 10-minute block times, and I believe 2 minutes on liquid for finality. But the beauty of liquid is that given the fact that there is a federation and changes can be made quicker than a different scenario, because it's not technically it's centralized, right? And that's okay, because if you're carrying around $400 of liquid in your Aqua wallet, that's fine, right? It's not like you're keeping your entire Bitcoin stash on liquid. So, correct me if I'm wrong, and Jesse, maybe you know more about this too, but the Federation is talking about limiting the amount of time for confirmations and finality a lot, and then reducing the fees a lot, which I think would help as well. But just the fact that you can have USDT on liquid, I think is a lot better compared to other options. You have confidential transactions, which enable the person to transact on liquid with any asset on liquid, and nobody can see the asset type that you're spending, and nobody can see the amount that you are spending with another party. And so compared to on-chain Bitcoin, that is a huge step up for privacy. So yeah, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that as far as the confirmation time? Because, just being real here, for Lightning right now, Lightning is technically, it can be quicker than Liquid, because you have to wait 1 or 2 minutes for confirmation on Liquid. But that is definitely subject to change as well.
I mean, two things that I'd mention on that is that you can have failed transactions on Lightning, and I don't. My experience is I certainly haven't seen that in Liquid. I don't even know if it's possible.
I've never seen that at all. Yeah.
And then on Liquid, I would say that it's more centralized than Bitcoin, but it doesn't really have a center, because there's 60 plus members of the federation. There's 15 functionaries. They're incentivized to do what's right for their users. Otherwise, they'll blow themselves up. But yeah, what do you think, Raul? Do you think that Liquid is a viable alternative for payments?
So yeah, I think our wallet homepage speaks to that in a way. Again, spending account. So it depends on how you would approach this when you want to describe what Liquid is to someone. The way I go about it tends to be, so what's Lightning? How would you give a simple explanation of Lightning to someone? You might say that you want to put in Lightning no more money than you would be willing to carry around in your wallet, which in certain countries it's less, it's more. But I think it should be what you're willing to spend in cash at the most. So you could apply, again, like Andrew said, it's not like you're necessarily going to keep most of your Bitcoin stash on Liquid, but you could find some use for it, especially if you want to have a certain amount of Bitcoin that you want to be able to swap easily into USDT for whatever reason. And also that a certain amount of Bitcoin that you want to be able to transact quicker when the network might be congested. And if you're using Aqua, it's also going to double as a certain amount of Bitcoin that you're going to be able to use via Lightning. So there are free use cases already for why you might want to have some Bitcoin on Liquid. And even if you're not using Liquid strictly, the way we implement Lightning, it does mean that Bitcoin on Liquid can be used for transactions. Now, if you want to go a different route, you could also argue that if you start using Liquid Bitcoin right now, you get fees that you got in on-chain Bitcoin a few years back. And that's quite enviable in some aspects. It's a good way to move money around. I think a lot of the arguments that have been made for Liquid is that it's used for bigger transactions between exchanges, moving around funds, etc. So you can apply that to your personal finances as well. You can use that to move Bitcoin around. A lot of people have been talking about using it as a DCA tool. So you stack a liquid Bitcoin and then you swap it over to on-chain. And that certainly works. As far as the trust model is referred, I think you can like Liquid or not, but I think you can get, it's easy to get rid of most of the Liquid FUD. I mean, it's not hidden anywhere. You can go read the Liquid white paper, and it's very well described. So I think it bears putting that out there more frequently because, again, it's not something shady, which is how a lot of people like to depict it. It's a pretty easy to understand trust model. It comes with trade-offs, but there are benefits to it, and you might want to look into those benefits. So yeah, it can be transactional. If something like reducing the block times, which is where the benefit of having a federation comes into play, reducing the block times, I don't know, reducing the fees or whatever also comes into play, then you could make a stronger case for why you might start wanting to use natively liquid Bitcoin for transactions. You can do it already in Aqua for Lightning, but it could be even better if the Federation would opt to do so.
And so I think as it applies to Tether, I think most of the volume right now is done on Tron. And I guess to a much lesser degree to Ethereum, given how high the gas prices are. But what would you say are the advantages of Tether on Liquid rather than something like Tron or on the other chains?
First of all, it's cheaper. And Tron got popular because it offered you, it was a few cents, then it was $1. Now it's around $2 fees. So $2 might not be a lot for people that have a lot of money, but $2 can be a lot of money in some parts of the world for people that, I don't know, make $2 an hour, $2 a day, especially if they're starting to get into Bitcoin. You don't want to pay $2 in fees, and that's a reality that you have to contend with. So in Liquid, you have fees that, well, due to the price, I think they're around 20 cents right now. If you're talking about reducing fees, eventually that could go lower. But also, it's fast. It doesn't compromise on the other motives that might push you to use Liquid on other chains. So right now in Aqua, we have integrations so you can use USDT on Ethereum and Tron, because those two are the ones that have the most Tether volume, basically. Ethereum is mostly for DeFi things, essentially. It's not used transactionally. I think Samson and Peter McCormack were just referring to that Peter couldn't use Ethereum Tether, basically in Argentina. He had to resort to Tron, which was more popular. But that's also going to shift eventually because, well, the fees are higher now. And the market is going to transition to whatever chain has the lower fees. So right now we have other altcoin chains that offer that. One of the main advantages that we have in Aqua is that if the market calls for it and we want to get people off the altcoin chain, the shitcoin chains, we can also integrate those in Aqua, and you can use it quite cheaply because right now what would cost you to pay more in Tron fees when you send it to Aqua, it's the actual fees in most cases. It's the network fees. So if you get cheap altcoin fees combined with cheap Liquid fees, you get a very feasible USDT Tether experience in Aqua.
You know, the reason that Tron became popular was the fees, but also because they leveraged their ICO to gain a network effect, to basically buy a network effect through exchange integrations. I mean, that was, in hindsight, a really clever thing to do on their part. I didn't realize that Aqua supported USDT on Tron and Ethereum. I mean, that's a really good idea because then you can leverage their network effect and get people into this ecosystem.
Yeah, and then you combine that with Lightning, And the main advantage, again, that you have, again, we ran the numbers, and probably the cheapest way for you to get money out of an exchange right now would be using Lightning rather than Tron. And also to deposit would be using Lightning in most cases. So you can use your Aqua wallet to basically as the hub, as the main hub for most of your Bitcoin transactions. And Lightning, the fact that you have both USDT and Lightning really goes a long way.
Do people actually do that? I've always wondered that. I know that Bitfinex has the largest Lightning node, but I've always wondered, do people actually use Lightning transactions to move currencies, to move assets between exchanges? Because it just seems like it's too small. Like I always thought that people would prefer to use Liquid if they were moving Bitcoin between exchanges. But maybe if people are using the exchange wallets for, as basically just a wallet, then maybe that does make sense. And they are using the Lightning Network to do that. And they're not actually using it for trading.
I have a more of an anecdotal experience with this. And I think most people, even that people that have a certain degree of Bitcoin experience, they don't often know how to get funds on Lightning. That happens more than you would imagine, because how do you do it? Most people don't know how to open a channel in a custodial wallet, or they don't want to because they don't want to deal with the fees. They might go in non-custodial. So here's what you get. If you use peer-to-peer markets in wherever you are, a lot of exchanges right now allow you to withdraw Lightning, and that's an easy way for you to get Lightning.
Yeah, no, that sounds similar to Liquid as well. That's the easiest way to get Liquid Bitcoin is, I'm not going to mess around trying to figure out, wait 100 confirmations when I can just go to Bitfinex and send Bitcoin and pull off Lightning Bitcoin, LBTC. They can do that for you, as can a couple of other exchanges. I think BTCE is another big one that does that. So, that's the easy way to do it. And people often ask, how do you do the peg in, peg out? That's, if you're me, you don't. you get a third party to do it for you.
We do get that. We get that question a lot, actually. Like at first, how do we get some liquid Bitcoin? Well, you could use Bitfinex, but you could also use Aqua, because if you get Lightning, you get liquid Bitcoin. So that's one way to do it. And again, it's a matter of simplicity. I'm an Android user. I'm a nerd. I like customization and all, but I know that Apple offers the easy alternative in most cases. It's easier to use. And I think a lot of people often, they kind of get caught up in their own bubbles of how they use Bitcoin. If you're a hardcore user, maybe, I don't know, maybe you want to peg in, peg out yourself. Maybe you want to open your own channels. Maybe you want to connect your wallet to your node. We're getting a lot of requests for advanced features. But in the end, first of all, it involves a valuable developer time. And also, we want to add that level of complexity to what is supposed to be an easy to use wallet. Because it can get a little bit overwhelming, basically. And that's basically what we want to avoid. We want to keep it as a wallet that's, again, the wallet that your grandma can use. Maybe you're slightly more tech-oriented grandma at the moment, but the idea is that you got to keep some things out of the way to allow for a better user experience.
Andrew, circling back to, you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that you're responsible for Jan3 Financial. Can you talk about what Jan3 Financial does?
We're a service where we help, again, high net worth individuals, family offices, corporations, institutions acquire large amounts of Bitcoin via OTC. And so, it's interesting. When we first launched a few months ago, there were some pretty bullish clients that we helped acquire Bitcoin. And, you can't, I can't go on Twitter and say, hey, this person from this country bought this amount of Bitcoin. But it is pretty interesting seeing the kind of people that we interact with and that are using this kind of service and buying Bitcoin through Jan3 Financial. It makes me bullish personally. Again, I wish I couldn't be as ambiguous as I have to be right now. But Bitcoin has definitely crossed the chasm of 10 years ago when nerdy cypherpunk kind of people who are only buying it, like libertarian type people. I mean, there are very real institutional brick and mortar business owning personas that understand the value of Bitcoin and are actively acquiring it right now. So anyways, that's Jan3 Financial, and it's a really interesting lens to be able to look through.
It definitely is. Yeah. And I know you can't give too much detail, but can you give us a hint as to like geographically, where do you see the demand coming for this kind of service?
Holland is a very interesting country right now.
I was going to say just Europe, maybe make it more.
I'll make it. Okay, I can go there. I mean, it is. Holland is a really interesting country adopting Bitcoin because you have a lot of disagreement with the current administration there. You have the farmers protesting. Farmers are really getting screwed over there, and any society without their farmers is going to collapse. You have to have farmers in your society, and so you have this big freedom movement coming from Holland, and I think this freedom movement happening, and the Bitcoin, the birth of Bitcoin, people using Bitcoin, they're very aligned. And I think you're seeing that a lot in Holland. And shout out to the Node Runners group in Holland. For anybody who doesn't know who the Node Runners are, I think they have, several hundred people. I think the average meetup they have is like 200 or 300 Bitcoiners, hardcore Bitcoiners. But they have this group called the Node Runners, and in order to be in the group, you have to run a node, and they're really principled Bitcoiners. But you see a lot happening out of Holland. I think there are a lot of smart people there who care about freedom and understand the value of sound money. Also Holland had the world reserve currency for about 80 or 90 years, a few hundred years ago. Okay, so and so they're just where the U.S. is going to be, right? Because nobody can have the world reserve currency forever.
They also seem susceptible to like tulip bubbles, so it's appropriate to get them into Bitcoin, right?
Oh, of course, yes, of course, yeah. Even though the tulip bubble only lasted for like 6 months, and Bitcoin's been around for about 15 years, but yeah, totally relevant. Of course.
Yeah, no, that's one of the classic Bitcoin FUDs, right? Is it's the tulip bubble. Though I don't know how people can say that now. I was listening to an interview with Peter Schiff recently, and it's just like, at what point do you admit?
Oh my gosh, that one is just so painful, isn't it? How is he still saying the same things? It's amazing.
That's right. That's right. At what point do you admit that the market is, you missed something, right? And it's like, you've lost a lot of money because you missed it too. So, I mean, that's funny. But I didn't expect you to say Europe. I thought you were going to say, Venezuela or someplace in Latin America, or to say maybe Zimbabwe or Turkey, someplace where inflation is really out of control. But it's interesting that it's driven by kind of political unrest rather than inflation or economic realities.
I wouldn't always say political unrest, right? I mean, the reality is, not everybody who owns Bitcoin is some kind of revolutionary. I mean, I'm really not even. I want life to be stable, good. I don't want to have some crazy revolution or any violent thing, anything like that, right? But like the reality is Bitcoin is a really good investment. It's the best investment that somebody has could have possibly made in the last decade. And people in the West, there's a lot of wealth in the West, at least right now. And people understand that inflation is picking up in the West. And so, I think it's a natural thing to, Bitcoin can ultimately lead to the separation of money and state. I personally, as an American, I want Bitcoin to bring more accountability to the dollar. So, but I think it brings accountability to the state. But the point being is that, Western governments have been living extremely irresponsibly by paying for ridiculous programs and wars, and so people in the West see that, and I mean, and you brought up Peter Schiff. That's the funny thing is, guys like that, Peter Schiff, I think in the same podcast we're talking about, he said, I wish I bought Bitcoin when I heard about it 10 years ago, and I regret not buying it. And he's going to say the same thing 10 years ago. I'm sorry, 10 years from now. Maybe he won't, but he'll internally feel that. And a lot of this is an issue with the ego, because for a lot of people, buying Bitcoin is an act of admitting that you were wrong in the past. And that's hard for a lot of people to do. I think that's hard for everybody to do.
Sure. That's why everyone should do jujitsu, right? Get that ego crushed every once in a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And then build the ego back up. You start crushing other people's egos. So it's like a cycle of ego death.
That's right. Yeah, on the revolutionary aspect of it, I would say that like you look at the demand for the ETFs, and those are all boomers, and I would say that those are not revolutionary, those are not rebellious people. These are the most buttoned down people probably in society. So a lot of the people that are investing in this aren't hoping for revolution. I've always thought that Bitcoin was a way to let off steam from the system, where clearly there's going to be pressures that grow, and that if you don't have some way to let that steam off, then there would be blood in the streets. And I've always thought that Bitcoin was the one option we have to kind of let off some of the steam as we go through this transition in kind of a bloodless and peaceful way. So I've always seen it as a peaceful asset that would help us get through this transition. That would, it's always going to be chaotic and volatile. I think Tour de Mestre has done some really good writing on this, but that's my thought on that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've thought about this a lot recently, because when you first get in Bitcoin and then you learn about how central banking works, you're like, oh my God, central banking is such a scam. The dollar is such a scam, which, I mean, central banking is I think it is quite literally a scam, right? But like, as an American, again, yeah, any American saying, I want Bitcoin to totally replace the dollar, I want the dollar to die, I don't think they understand what they're saying. I don't think they understand how much they truly benefit from the dollar being the world reserve currency. Donald Trump the other day, actually, I don't know if you guys heard this interview, but yeah, it was on CNBC, and he was saying he kind of endorsed Bitcoin in that interview. He pretty overtly endorsed Bitcoin, but he also said that if the U.S. loses the status of having the world reserve currency, that would be the equivalent of losing a world war. And he's not wrong. I mean, the man, whatever you think about Donald Trump, he's right. That would be a serious problem for America. And I think not just America, but other countries that depend on the dollar. So, I agree with the United States sending 80 or 90 or 100 billion, whatever we're at, dollars to Ukraine, and then all these other countries that we're funding to, and having 800 military bases and in 130 different countries. And it's like ancient, it's like the end of the ancient Roman Empire. Like, I think everybody can agree the United States has really spread itself thin. But if we have a way to bring accountability back to the dollar and bring constitutional values back to the dollar, constitutional values such as Article 1, Section 10, which very clearly state that money in the United States must be backed off of gold or silver. It's very clear. Okay. And so gold or silver, that, they have failed to keep the dollar backed off of it. So if Bitcoin can replace those, if Bitcoin can keep, the federal government in check for not inflating Americans' hard-earned money, then I think that would be a very good thing for America and the rest of the world too, because so many people depend on dollars for their well-being.
I believe in hyper-Bitcoinization, but I think it'll take place over a longer period of time. I think that, Samsung's $1 million target price, that when you think about how that would play out, that could be massively disruptive. I'm not sure if we want to see that in a short term.
I agree with you. I think when people say you want the dollar to collapse, or you want that $1 million Bitcoin, then you have to wonder, what does the world look like in those conditions if the dollar collapses or such? More than anything, to add a bit to Andrew's point, I think ETFs are basically the capitulation of the market and Wall Street, the big markets, accepting that Bitcoin will not go away anytime soon. And now what you have left are the Peter Schiffs, the Talebs, the Nouriel Roubinis, that basically cannot admit that they were wrong. That they're the meme Bitcoin fathers. But outside of that, you have you have very traditional investors that are looking to get into Bitcoin, either because they see the potential in it as an investment. I mean, for all the talk we see about NVIDIA stock, Bitcoin would have done better over the past year or so. So it's still in most cases, especially right now, it's the best investment you could have made. And if you're looking at it from the freedom angle, if you don't like the way things are going in your country because you've already seen it play out in a different country, it's also one of the freer ways to allocate your wealth, especially especially if you're really intricate about how you're going to store your Bitcoin or how you're going to buy your Bitcoin.
There's been such a massive shift, I think, within the banks in their attitude towards Bitcoin. In 2016, I pitched in the bank the idea of a Bitcoin GBTC type product, not an ETF, not even an ETF, but like an ETN, and basically got laughed out of the room. There was no interest in it. And I was told, well, there's no way we're going to put our name next to that. And then yesterday for our other podcast, Bitcoin Capital, Fernando, the marketing director of Blockstream, was sharing some potential targets of people that work within banks. And there's managing directors Goldman's, Deutsche, all these big banks with guys whose title is working on digital assets. I wonder how long it'll take for that and not even just at a top level, but at a regional level, people for various, APAC, head of digital assets. I wonder how long it'll take for those titles to mature into, APAC, head of Bitcoin. As they're slowly learning where the real kind of substance is to this technology and this industry.
Yeah, digital assets sounds a lot more professional than Bitcoin, right?
It does. Yeah.
Doesn't it? Like blockchain specialist, digital assets, whatever. It sounds a lot more professional. So yeah, that's interesting too. Yeah, we're currently, I can't say the name, but we're talking with a very large, very well-known bank based out of the West, and they're looking at making their own ETF. They're looking at buying Bitcoin as part of their treasury. Whether or not they actually do it, that's a different thing. I don't want to promise a whole lot and then it never happens. But just from an internal point of view, I mean, we are talking with a very large notable bank that finally, after years of being contacted about looking at Bitcoin, is now starting to entertain the idea of embracing this thing. So it is interesting to see stuff like this happening from the inside.
So not only are banks adopting Bitcoin, but football clubs are also adopting Bitcoin. This is my segue to talk about Botev football. So I know Anton, I know George as well. I see that you guys had a recent announcement with them. What's going on with the Botev football club?
Well, I've known George for years now, actually. George Manolov,
Yep.
Bitcoin consultant, and he recently got involved with the Botev football club, and well, not recently, excuse me, but he's been working on their Bitcoin adoption initiatives. And so it's a very good synergistic alignment with what we have going on with them. Soccer. I want to hand it off to Raul because Raul's the Venezuelan soccer guy.
You lost all credibility when you said soccer. You lost all credibility.
Yeah, excuse me. I'm sorry, football.
Please, Raul, save this segment. Rescue us.
I'm from a baseball nation, but I am a huge soccer or football fan.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, see?
So basically, I don't know if you're a football fan as well, Jesse.
Not at all.
Well, basically when Andrew initially pitched this possible collaboration with Botev, I think what I saw was the potential that football has. I mean, for all the wrong type of football, American football, people love it in the States, but
shots fired.
Your biggest football match in the year, the Super Bowl, gets probably as much viewership as an average Champions League match, basically, or a good Champions League match. So football is massive. And I think if we want to bring Bitcoin to, millions or billions of people, you got to put it in a really big stage. And there are few stages as big as world football. You get that in the World Cup. It's the most popular sport in the world. What Botev gives us is the possibility to connect Bitcoin with the fans, because football fans are very passionate, and Eastern European football fans are even more passionate. So the idea that these Botev fans are now going to see Bitcoin as something that directly identifies with their beloved club, it's something that we can not miss on. We're also working to get these fans to use Aqua because, well, if you're going to get into Bitcoin, you're going to have to use a wallet eventually. So George has a whole thing set up for the fans, but in the end, it's about expanding that cultural impact that Bitcoin has already had, and you see in how passionate Bitcoiners can be over to football because it's just two very passionate segments. I think and this is something that we talked with George and the rest of the Botev team. We're looking at, there's a show called Welcome to Wrexham. It's about Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, another Hollywood actor. They bought a fifth division English fifth division football team. They made a TV show about it, and it's one of the most watched TV shows in the United States, at least for the past 2 years. In a country that doesn't actually like football. Why? Because, well, you manage to mix football with something with these guys, with these Hollywood guys that are really popular. So our idea is to get Bitcoiners interested in football, but also to get football fans interested in Bitcoin. And obviously, this is just Bulgaria right now. This is our way to make a splash in Bulgaria in the football scene. A lot of people see Bitcoin, for example, you have El Salvador. A lot of people see the resurgence of the country under the Bukele administration. They correlated to Bitcoin and is very tightly related. So maybe we can bring that closer to the team as well, so the team can restore some of its glory. And there's also another angle in the footballing world, because football is getting kind of polluted with what a lot of people would call fiat football clubs, your Manchester Cities, your PSGs. I think George talked about this in his Bitcoin Atlantis presentation. And there's also some financial fair play angle over in football. So the fact that Botev is embracing some sort of financial responsibility, which is something that Bitcoiners love to talk about, I think it ties in really nicely with the whole club's philosophy. So right now we're talking Botev, but it would be amazing to bring this over to teams in other parts of the world, especially in Latin America, where people are so passionate about football. I don't know, Ricardo Salinas has a team. We keep on pinging him on Twitter, so maybe he can also make a Mazatlan a Bitcoin team. But this is the first one. The first top division. There's Peter McCormick's team, which again, it football moves the masses. Bitcoin moves the masses as well. I think the synergy between those two things can be massive, and we could not pass up on the opportunity to support them.
What do you mean by that term, Fiat Football Club? I didn't see George's presentation. What does that term mean?
So basically what you've been seeing over the past, I want to say, let's call it a decade or so, slightly more, is that basically nation states like Qatar and Saudi Arabia and the United Emirates bought football teams. So now you get basically traditional football clubs competing against teams that have endless budgets. Basically, your Manchester Cities, and there's a whole angle to it. Maybe they don't play by the rules, but basically they have endless resources. And this was something that George talked about. And in fact, in their own country, in Bulgaria, we did some research. Even some of the bigger teams in Bulgaria have had basically, it's called financial fair play sanctions, because basically they were not playing by the financial rules of the league that the European federation set forth. So there's a lot of football is not necessarily, well, if you read the news, you know that FIFA is probably more powerful than the UN, and that it's not necessarily the most pristine, clean sport in many aspects. So if you want to bring some of that Bitcoin purity to football, I think it also has a nice ring to it.
What about some of the other integrations you guys are working at? Like, I understand you're doing something with BTCMap project. What are you doing there?
If Aqua is going to be a wallet where the average person uses it and it's easy to use, then there should be a lot of other features that connect them with other possibilities to use Bitcoin. And BTCMap is such a great idea. It's one of one of those things where you're surprised nobody came up with it before. So shout out to Nathan Day on that one. So we're in communication with BTCMap about being able to enable Aqua users to have the map natively installed or used in Aqua. So that's one of them. We have a few other things in mind. I don't know if we can talk about that right now, but it is a really good idea to have almost like a doodle maps of locations which accept Bitcoin, where you can spend your Bitcoin.
So just to clarify, that's what BTCMap project is. It's a Google map type setup that shows you where you can spend and purchase stuff with Bitcoin.
Yeah, for anybody listening who hasn't used BTCMap, you have to download this. It is such a good idea. It's very easy to use. You just download it, open it. It's like Doodle Maps, and then you see anybody near you who accepts Bitcoin. And if you know somebody who, for me, for example, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, I ask people whenever I go out, hey, do you accept Bitcoin? And sometimes they do. And so after that, I've had situations where I've talked to those business owners and said, well, I'd like to put your business on this map here. See this map where other businesses accepted, and then there are more people like me who want to take their business and support a company which accepts Bitcoin, and they like that. From a business owner's perspective, they want more customers, so it makes sense. It makes economic sense for them. It's not all ideological or anything like that. So yeah, BTCMap and Aqua, I think they're a very good fit.
That's great. And so maybe to wrap things up, can you guys talk about the roadmap for Aqua? What kind of integrations you have lined up for the future, and what kind of features you guys have in the works to roll out?
So the as we discussed, having Tether and Bitcoin and Liquid on there and Lightning functionality is a huge differentiator. But having one app, almost like a Bitcoin super app, where you can download it and then you have everything you need on there, that's pretty compelling. Because there are a lot of different companies and services and apps right now, and it's pretty confusing for the average person to navigate all that. So if you have a very easy to use app which connects everything you would need in order to own Bitcoin and use your Bitcoin, then that would be pretty powerful. So yeah, I would say stay tuned, TM. That's my statement. Raul, what do you think?
Well, again, I think besides the possibility of having all your Bitcoin needs fulfilled in a single wallet in one place with, Lightning, Liquid, USDT, on-chain Bitcoin, the idea of having a marketplace and basically adding integrations that are going to be useful for different types of people in different parts of the world is really appealing for any potential Aqua users. So ideally, we would love to have integrations in every major market or every part of the world, so that people don't have to leave their Aqua wallets, to get their local currency, which is something a lot of people do. They need to sell Bitcoin in some cases, or they need to sell USDT, or there are services that allow you to pay bills, for example, locally using either Bitcoin or USDT. So again, it's about making Aqua a hub for all things Bitcoin, so you never have to leave the app. Which sounds ambitious, but why shouldn't it be? I mean, I think there's. I mean, we've seen Bitcoin take off quite quickly, but if right now, I think it's all about making it more accessible and put it in the hands of more people, and that implies not only seeing Bitcoin as the asset that you watch go up in price year after year or every 4 years, but also being able to integrate it to your day-to-day life quite easily. And these integrations are what we are hoping that will allow us to do that. Again, like Andrew says, stay tuned. But essentially, we want to add as many of these as possible, as long as it's sensitive to do so, because this allows people to use Bitcoin more, and we should want people to use Bitcoin and Lightning more, and Liquid as well. And if they want to use USDT, that's perfectly fine as well, because again, that's usability for the network. So it's all about putting services in the hands of people. That's it.
That's great. I think you guys are definitely on the right track, and look forward to having you guys on again when you have some new features rolled out. Really, really appreciate you taking the time to do this today.
Right, Jesse.
Happy to do so, Jesse.
Thanks, guys.